Okay, today I'm excited to have Tom Anderson for an interview. We always like to have customers that do really sophisticated things with our tool and learn more about them, and also use them as inspiration for other people who want to do similar things. And Tom has certainly done very interesting things with our tool and also beyond that. So hello, Tom. Can you explain, maybe first start with with your background and how did you arrive at the idea, at the actual idea of what you have been doing with our tool?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and really appreciate the opportunity. So by background, I started out in financial services. I originally was in investment banking, and then I was a financial advisor for about 17 years at firms in the United States, Merrill, Lynch, and Morgan Stanley. And then I left to create a financial technology company that's been successful. And so this is my kind of second endeavor. And our initial hypothesis was that, for the billions of dollars that have been put into financial planning and software and apps, and you can get more information than ever on your phone, money is still the #1 cause of stress. And so our plan of attack was to create a free financial plan for people. So our company is Anasova. We operate through a website, freefinancialplan.com. And our mission, which led to us to you, was to deliver free financial plans to people.
Okay, that's very interesting. But the free financial plan is, of course, it's easier to say than to actually implement, because you basically have you ask a lot of input parameters to people, like things like how much they earn and what their current assets are, and much more. And based on that, you create a free financial plan that indicates, or that gives advice what they have to do to grow their assets. How do you actually do that? Because there's a model behind that converts actually the input parameters to the output, to the plan, to the advice. How did you create that model? Because that is something that we see with other customers, that they often struggle. They often have the expertise, but then to convert that expertise into a model is one step beyond, and it's more difficult. So how did you do that?
Yeah, it is difficult. Fortunately, your tool helps make it easy, but I'll explain the process first. So when a financial advisor is talking to somebody, in our use case, they typically have a shelf of questions. So, if somebody tells me that they are 23 years old, I'm going to ask them different questions. And if they tell me they're 65, if someone has kids, that will lead to one set of questions, which would be different than if someone says they don't have kids. So we can define that shelf however broadly or narrowly that you want to, but essentially, look, there's between 50 and 200 questions that I could ask you about your personal finances. What I need to do is I need to put those questions through a logic layer that says, who do I want to ask, what question when? And so that's the first layer of what your tool does for us. So we basically just kind of code my mind into, what questions would we want to ask to whom. Then along the way, you're basically, an advisor is doing formulas on the person. So if you tell me that you have $50,000 of assets, I'm going to ask you one set of questions. And if you tell me you have $1 million of assets, I'm going to ask you a different set. So some of them are not only qualified based logic, it's number-based logic that you want to be having go through. And then once you gather that input, you want to run that through a formula layer. That formula layer then comes into an output layer, and that output layer will have essentially different widgets depending on where the person is at their different phases in life. So those are the different layers to the process. Each one of them is essentially coding your mind. And that's the outer layer of the onion, but we can go however deep you'd like to.
Did you made a first prototype or like a proof of concept of that model in Excel or in Google Sheets first before starting with our tool?
Not as much as one might think. Actually, what we really just started doing was building and experimenting, which has pros and cons to it. I think that in retrospect, maybe we should have spent a little bit more time kind of outlining it in some type of a tool and having the flow. But we learned a lot through user experience and just having, watching people go through the tool on what was working, what wasn't working, what type of flow. The more questions we ask, the more detail we can give in our output, but the more questions we ask, the greater the drop off. So there's kind of a constant balance there. So a lot of it has been more user-based interaction than that we just started building, watched the feedback and refined more than like having a comprehensive map on the front end.
Yeah, and then maybe a follow-up question is like, once you add the tool, you still have to attract people that basically discover the tool and are going to use it. And when I look at the website freefinancialplan.com, it doesn't look like a typical financial services website. So do you have any tips to make it as attractive as possible to attract people that will then fill in the assessment, because it's quite a time investment for people to fill it in, basically.
Yeah. So in our case, so what turns out is that financial services advertising is very expensive and moderately to not particularly effective. So if I'm trying to advertise something like a mortgage product or a credit card or talk to a financial planner, what we find is that people don't really want to do that. And the typical call to action on their website is, call me or fill out an application. And people don't want to talk to people. They don't want to fill out an applications. And they don't want to wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I wonder, today's the day I'm going to refinance my mortgage. The whole system is very kind of complicated, but there's a tremendous amount of money spent on advertising. Go to my webpage to then hit the contact me button, which we think is a kind of a weird process. So the way that we've changed that is come to us for a free financial plan and click on it. It's fast, free, and anonymous. And we find that those 3 points end up being compelling, and people like quizzes, people like engaging, people like getting feedback. And so it's much more effective for us to advertise, get a free financial plan, than it is any individual product. Once people have the plan, then we can present different solutions to them, and the audience is automatically much more receptive to the idea at that point in time.
Interesting. But you also work together with third parties to integrate the free financial plan in their apps or like in their environment.
Yes. So our original idea on the company, so the initial hypothesis that we had was that this was going to be a direct-to-consumer company, leveraging the free financial plan website, which we still have and run many plans, as you see every day on the direct-to-consumer side. But what happened along the way is once we built this, a company came and kind of tapped us on the shoulder and said, hey, could we white label your solution? And so we said, absolutely. And so what we did was essentially initially, and as you know, this has evolved a bit, but we copied what we had built, erased our name and logo, put their name and logo into it, and then they rolled it out to their users. And so what we have since discovered is that there's a big opportunity in delivering these as white labeled solutions to companies as an engagement tool on the front end of their website.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and that's what the sophisticated use of our tool. What I was talking about is not only you created like the free financial plan. I mean, that's the traditional way to use our tool, so to say. But then to white label it and to resell it basically to other customers who have potentially a much broader audience, so you can scale it much much bigger way without doing additional effort, because that's you use basically the same assessment. You just change the logo for the white labeling. So that's interesting, and that's a good example of scaling your business without having to invest a lot of resources, which is basically one of the things that we want to our customers to enable with.
Okay. So the neat thing, to just follow up on that for a second, I mean, so our time gets to go to logic, content, and output, because if we're using your system and then we're using their clients to access it, our expertise is really just trying to have the best input-output experience that we can deliver for clients, and we don't have to kind of involve ourselves on either end of the process. And so we like that ability to specialize. So the white label solution combined with your software lets us kind of do what we think we do best.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another aspect is, I think, the tapping into new markets and democratization, because you, as we know, like private banking or like financial services for wealthy individuals is only affordable, or like it's only people with a lot of assets who are privileged to have access to these kind of services traditionally, because these are face to face. And typically you need, I don't know, 500,000 to 1 million in assets to have access to these services. But you democratized it by using digital tools, I mean, that's good for the audience, but also good for you, because you tap into new markets which are not served by the traditional financial services players. But was that also like a conscious move of you?
Very much. It actually was a conscious move. So some things have happened kind of serendipitously, and other things were actually by plan and design. This was a hypothesis of ours that ended up being correct, or at least it seems to be correct so far. That to your exact point, if you have more than $2 million, everybody would in the financial services industry would like to work with you. But what an interesting time if you have a net worth of $50,000 to $2 million. In particular, imagine that you're 45 years. So our average user, and we can talk about the standard deviation around it and what we track, is about 47 years old. They have a net worth around $500,000. Most of that is in their home and then a retirement plan, checking and savings account. They have limited assets that they can move to an advisor. And so advisors typically don't target that market because it's not profitable for them, because it takes so much time to gather the information and data. We actually now gather that very quickly for them. But that market wants advice. They have kids. They are trying to live their best life today, and they want to be on track for the future. So there's a tremendous need within the US, about 68 million households that are not really being served. They're not getting what they want through free index funds. They're not getting it through robo-advisors. They're not getting it through asset allocation funds. They're not getting it through the advisor channel. These people want advice, and you can cover really good, the basics, through a really good plan. And then what we find is plans start the conversation. So we actually originally designed this is a little more than you were looking for, but we designed this initially with the thought that the plan would be the answer. And we're finding that it's not. When people get the plan, they want a conversation. And so it is an efficient way to start the conversation, because now I already have all of the data. And it used to take me multiple conversations to find out, are you married? Do you have kids? What are your assets? All these things. Now we can actually just get into business. So the tool does enable people to serve a much broader market. And it's been interesting to see kind of how the hypothesis has evolved to where it is today.
And you already demonstrated your expertise by offering them the tool and offering them personalized advice via the tool, so they will trust you more for subsequent services.
Actually, it is worth hammering that home to, I think, the whomever watches this. What I found as a professional, and I am consistently finding in the tool is the more that you give away really good free advice, the more people want to talk to you. It's the beginning of the story, not the end. So don't hold back your best things. Put your best things out there, put them out there for free, and people will gain trust and confidence in the rest of the things that you say. There's plenty of opportunities to drive a good relationship, but it is hard to establish that front end credibility. And so the more that you can do that by putting your best things out there, I think you get more business that way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, maybe in terms of numbers, if you want to share some of them, we know that I recently looked up, I think it was a survey done by HubSpot or research, like a study, which indicated that, yeah, of course, financial services is amongst the most expensive in terms of cost per lead. So the number of dollars that someone is prepared to buy a lead online, I think it was about $300, but I mean, it depends, of course, on a number of factors. What did you experience in terms of cost per lead, comparing with like other channels, maybe paid advertising, or even salesman or woman that goes to the golf club, which is a bit the traditional way of acquiring this kind of private banking customers?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We'll kind of break it into two different channels. So I actually had dinner with someone the other day, and they were telling me a little bit about how their funnel works. So they do advertising events on Google. Their cost per click, they had theirs at $7. They got it down to about $3. About 3% of people who hit it apply for their product. So it's about $100 per application, but only about 1 in 5, they're trying to get it to 1 in 3 are qualified. So about 1 in 5 are rejected. So their cost per closed transaction comes out to that $300 to $500, and that kind of ties to some of the things that you've, seen before. Part of the problem there is a lot of people are applying that aren't qualified. And that's a that funnel is common, and we can kind of come into more detail. What we found is that in advertising a free financial plan, initially it cost us $75 as we were doing our very first test to get completed plans. And then we quickly got that to fall to $20, and then we got it to fall to $15. And now, we're able to consistently drive plans for about $8, which is, but then once we have that data, we're able to send much more qualified applications through the funnel, because as a part of the plan, we have about 50 data points on people. So even if it's anonymous, we're only going to surface things that are relevant to the user. So the experience on the front end, the click-through rates is much better process. So we estimate that our action ratio is actually higher than Google's click-through ratio, which is very exciting. And it's just kind of the power of that, scanning process. All of this is, to your second point, much more efficient than a salesperson. So I had a business development person who was wonderful, but their job was to be out in the community and talking to people. And if you could generate 5 to 10 quality leads per month, that would be amazing for a person. You literally would pay people it's hard to generate high quality leads as an individual walking around in a community. Our tool, as generates many. You can qualify, qualified or unqualified, but even unqualified is then qualified for a different segment. So anyone who runs a plan is qualified for something in our mind, and we're able to do many per day across multiple channels. So the efficiency compared to a person is it's lights out. You can't compare it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Really interesting results. Would you think that this could be relevant for other industries as well, and how exactly? That can be useful for other listeners who are not in the financial services industry.
Yeah. So another client of yours actually evolved from a dinner party that I was at. I was having drinks with a doctor friend, And we were talking about the front end of their website, and it's that same thing. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to call you about my, pain. I should get some type of initial, feedback. And so they ended up using the survey tool and saying, let me ask you a few front end questions. And then they are able to generate some type of output to the person. And then the person is much more receptive to, a phone call to you, that both the doctor and the individual have more information when you introduce some type of a survey interface and some type of intelligence coming into the first conversation. And so I think that in any application, anyone who has a button that says contact us, that should be knocked out and replaced with some type of a logic-based filter where all contact us buttons should go away. Is, I guess, my if you are in an industry where you have that button, you should rethink that process.
We often see it in, especially in B2B, where you sell like a more complex solution, and that you want in the first stage, at the prospecting stage, that you want to have help your prospects to quantify the potential benefits of your tool, solution, service, whatever it is, that you are trying to sell. And also, basic rule there is that the value that you deliver at the end of the assessment should be usable. Also in the case that people do not choose for your solution. So then, and you can say that up front, even before taking the assessment, saying, okay, you will be doing this, you will invest some time in this, but what you get out is valuable independently of which solution you choose, whether you choose us for the services or others, doesn't matter. And I think that's also in the case with the free financial plan. If the advice is always useful, also if you don't continue with the providers that you recommend, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, so we solidly are, 70% of our plans, people don't take some type of action, and we just hope that they receive some good information and they did something. But I think the other side of the statistic is amazing. About 30% of people do something, which is crazy. Those numbers are much, much, much higher than display or search or any other type. I mean, it's a high conversion ratio. But to your point of just giving away good information, and a lot of people will do what they do, I'm completely aligned with that approach.
Okay, we're almost at the end. Do you have some one main tip or advice to conclude with for other people that want to do the same thing, maybe not in the same industry, in their domain? Is there anything else that you want to advise about?
Yeah, well, let's see, I could go into a couple of things, but big picture takeaways, I think that one, you want to rent the technology infrastructure. I'm not trying to plug what you're doing, but I don't want to spend time trying to build your infrastructure. It will take the rest of my life trying to perfect the logic and the user experience. So rent, don't build the technology infrastructure, regardless of, to your point, who cares what vendor you go with. Definitely rent that infrastructure, one. Two, consider the constraints. Any system that is rented, not built, will have inherent constraints to it. You have a lot of knowledge from the processes that you've done, and so it's actually been more beneficial for us to learn to work within the constraints than to try to work around them, if that makes some sense. Mm-hmm. It actually makes us more disciplined with how we ask the questions. And then three is release something. We are continuously both proud and embarrassed about our product. There are no technological limits to what can be done. And so, like, we have a good product in the market right now, and we are excited to, continuously iterate it to make it, better and better and better. And so what I would encourage people to think about is, don't try to get to a perfect state, try to get to a very good state, release it and get feedback. And then that just kind of comes into what I mentioned before. we track so much feedback and then try to refine the product based off of that feedback. And I think that would be my biggest thing. What you think people want is going to end up being different. Monitor closely what people say and want, and that's what you should build.
Yeah, that's a bit the startup advice, like building an MVP, minimum viable product that people can use, and then start acting on the feedback. I think that's really good advice. Thank you for that.
There's a TV show called Silicon Valley in the US, which is based Yeah, they have in one of the episodes, they say, if you're not later mortified about your MVP, you release too late. And that's the right take. Release something, get feedback is the right way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. I think this was very useful and will be very useful for the listeners also. Maybe repeat that they can find your site at freefinancialplan.com. So that's freefinancialplan in one word and then .com. I think there's also an example report there, and it really looks amazing. It's really something that you would think that is manually written by hand by an expert, but actually it's auto-generated. So that's really nice. And so where can people find you online besides via freefinancialplan.com? Is there any, do you have any activity on LinkedIn, Twitter, or somewhere else?
Yeah, our company site is anasova.com. Check out, build a plan. I would love feedback from anyone. So you can contact me. There's a contact us button down below, but we love feedback. So whatever you like or don't like about the plans, let us know. I'm terrible on social media. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I probably need to do more things there. But yeah, check out our company sites and contact us with any questions or comments anytime.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.